Nigeria's leading shareholder groups, the Independent Shareholders Association of Nigeria hosted its 2016 Triennial Conference, focusing on the theme Financial Turbulence and Regulatory Framework in a Recession Economy. The chairman of the occasion, Mr. Kalu, gave his opening remarks.
The Nigerian economy is undergoing some difficult time. Some call it recession. Others have upgraded it to a state of reflation. But whichever, the financial sector of the economy is in a state of turbulence. It could not therefore have been more appropriate than now for ISAN to invite us to share in what promises to be an enlightenment and advisory talk on financial turbulence and regulatory framework in a recession economy.
Guest speaker and former Group Managing Director of Ecobank, Mr. Arnold Ekpe, gave his keynote, speaking on how Nigeria could revive its economy through the recession.
You can argue that our recession is self-induced, that we caused it ourselves. But the fact is, and we must keep this in mind, that a recession is not a permanent state of affairs. It is part of the evolution of the economic cycle. And we're not the first and will not be the last country to go through a recession. In the case of our country, the impact of the recession is being felt right across the board. It's being felt in lower purchasing power, which I think we're all experiencing to one extent or the other. Lack of job opportunities for the young people. Workers being laid off. In fact, we can argue that we're not having a recession, we're having a stagflation, which means we're having a recession with inflation because prices are going up. Prices are not coming down. Some of you may remember, because you're active in the capital markets, that as a result of the Lehman Brothers crisis around 2008, a lot of Western countries went into recession. A lot. Virtually all of the West. And what did they do? The first thing they did was for the government to come out with a clear plan of action to provide encouragement and to provide a sign to the people that the situation can be handled. And the second thing that was done was the government put together, those governments that were affected, put together an inflationary and expansionary budget. A budget that was put together so that money could be injected into the system. Because without injection of money into the system, the economy cannot move smoothly. So a lot of those governments, either Obama's government or Tony Blair's government, and you name it, right across the world, what they did was they spent a lot of money on infrastructure, on rescuing companies, because they saw that as a way to move the country forward, to ensure that jobs are not lost, and to ensure that businesses do not collapse. The other thing they did was they dropped interest rates so that the cost of money would be reasonable. The cost of money, if it's too high, people don't borrow. And we've got to ask ourselves, is the cost of money in our country too high? If you're paying 20% to borrow, you're not likely to borrow. At least I'm not likely to borrow because it's too high. How do we begin to bring down the interest rates to inject some energy into our economy? And I dare say that this government needs to move fairly quickly to beginning to inject more money to lower the interest rates and to get projects going. I have argued that we are wasting time, we're obsessing about exchange rates unduly. The most important thing to every single one of us here, every one of us here, is that we want our economy to grow. We want our economy to grow in such a manner that we, as parents, and our children, and our relations, and our brothers and sisters can have jobs. That is the most important thing, the well-being of the people. So whatever decision we take has to pass one test and one litmus test only. Does it develop the country? Does it result in growth? And if it doesn't result in growth, we shouldn't do it. If by maintaining high interest rates, the country doesn't grow, we shouldn't do it. If the exchange rate is so strong that it doesn't result in growth, we should look at it again. The market has collapsed significantly. How do you move the market forward? There is a challenge of regulation. Regulation is not easy. If you do too much of it, you kill the baby. If you do too little of it, the baby runs wild. So how do you balance the two? And I dare say that is a dynamic process. There's no one formula. But I think there's an approach where you create an ecosystem of both minority shareholders, majority shareholders, the regulators, both the SEC and the stock exchange, and we begin to ask ourselves some very fundamental questions. Why is our stock market not growing as much as it should grow? We have major stories in the papers about asset sales. What's wrong with selling those assets? There's absolutely nothing wrong with them if we get a good price for them. I think what people are worried about is not whether they're sold or not, but what the proceeds will be used for. Will they be used to get the economy out of recession? That's what people are worried about. But, you know, we've got to do something. We cannot keep talking and talk and talk and talk. Nigeria is a major country. It is a great country. It cannot be ignored. But for a long time, we have not lived up to expectations. This country to progress, our country that we love so much, to progress, that progress has to come from us. Charity has to begin at home. If the stock market is to move, then we must encourage domestic investors. We must get more people investing, more institutions investing. And that is a challenge that we must achieve. Because if we don't do that, we'll keep bumping along the bottom, we'll keep talking, we'll keep regulating, but the cake will not grow bigger. This country has come a long way. And we should not say that we have not come a long way, we have. But a lot of things that we should have done that we have not done. So in the scheme of things, although we've moved along, we have not moved as fast as the rest of the world. So the rest of the world has moved ahead of us. So we call ourselves a great power, but we're not as great as we should be. We were number one in Africa in economic terms 2 years ago. The Naira has lost 50% of its value, so we're no longer. South Africa is number one. So let us give ourselves a challenge. Let us try and regain our position as the number one economic power in Africa. We have the people, we have the oil, we have the economic base, but we need to get things like power working and all those things that a country needs to be able to build a viable economy. We are at a crossroads. The world is not waiting for us. If we don't move, the rest of the world will leave us behind, which is what they're doing.
Mr. Bismarck Rewane, CEO of Financial Derivatives, Sir Nwosu, Outgoing National Coordinator of ISAN, and Mr. Mansur Ahmed, Director of Dangote Group, speak further on the economic recession and the way forward for Nigeria.
What we see here is that political office holders have to be clear in their mind that the fallout of a recession needs political courage to deal with the reality. Secondly, the policymakers have to frame and articulate policies that deal with this, right, and make hard choices. Then the regulators have to complement the policies that have been articulated to ensure that everybody is aligned. So first and foremost, we have to have consensus on what is wrong, consensus on the paths to be charted, and then alignment on the policies and the regulations.
Well, my take position on this is that government should descend and come very low to the grassroots and understand where it pinches. It's not just rhetorically saying all manner of things. There is hunger everywhere, and every segment of Nigeria political climate has actually agreed that there is hunger everywhere. And with empty stomach, I do not think anybody can give any meaningful advice or job or any other thing that has to do with strength on it to the government. So my take on this is that government should pump in more money into the system so that the buying power will increase through hard work, especially through agricultural process. And that will further help us to reduce expenses on importation of food items, and the people too will have enough cash by ensuring that whatever we are into will be something that can circulate and give people hope.
These are very difficult times, very turbulent times, and I think all companies, large and small, are affected. But it does require perhaps the pursuit of some very clear principles. One is that every company must now look at its costs and make sure that you cut out any fat, any areas where you can reduce your costs and improve your efficiency. I think this is the time to do it. Secondly, I think we have to be focused as well on your market, on your customers, and make sure that you are as close to your customers as you can. Of course, we have to be very innovative as well, especially with regards to how we finance our operations. As you are aware, we have been investing very, very robustly and massively, and this area is particularly hit by the current circumstances, whereby financing is difficult, liquidity has been a problem, and of course, as we all know, the availability and price of foreign currency has become a major issue. But we are dealing with it the best we can. We are bringing all the resources at our disposal, trying to harness these resources to ensure that our programs, and particularly our investment programs, are not unduly affected.
A major takeaway from this conference and the discourse on the economy is that Nigeria needs a consensus in policy direction, focusing on growth that will reposition the economy as a great giant in Africa and competitive in the world.